you get all fruits all year long, right? If you see mangoes in April, do you feel happy about it?
Yeah.
Feel excited about it? Want to go and buy? This time
We call up our friends and ask them to pick it up from Rajahmundry.
From Rajahmundry. Yeah. So, but the way that mangoes come early to market is through artificial ripening. So artificial ripening has become very rampant in India now, and of course elsewhere also. I mean, many of the fruits that you get here are also artificially ripened. So they are actually plucked from the tree several days before they should be. When they are kind of 75% ripe is when they should be plucked, and then they are ripened for about 6 days or so before they actually are perfect, for eating. And that's like the tastiest mango that you can get. But they are plucked, maybe 2-3 weeks before they should be, and then they are ripened just in 24 hours by using calcium carbide crystals. So you take a crate of mango, you put calcium carbide crystals in them, and then that leads to artificial ripening. 24 to 48 hours, you have the whole lot. If you have a whole room full of mangoes, you can just ripen them. But calcium carbide is a carcinogenic. It's a very harmful chemical. In fact, it is banned. So occasionally, every season, actually, you see news saying that so many lots of mangoes have been seized because they are using calcium carbide. But those are only few incidents where due to some reason or other the authorities decided to seize some mangoes. This is a photograph from the Hindu. But I went and talked to 3 or 4 mango vendors in Hyderabad, and all of them said that it's the most common practice. They definitely know that the mangoes that they're selling are artificially ripened with calcium carbide.
Do the guys, the farmers who do this actually end up in jail or no? Like when they're seized, do the farmers or
typically, I mean, this is at the level of the traders. After they purchase from the.
Does somebody actually get sentenced, or is it even?
See, that just depends. They definitely, if it is seized, there will be a case which will be slapped on them, and then they'll have to pay some fines or whatever. They might even be required by law to close their business. But typically, these things are lax in India, so they would resurface, in some other form. So this is another table I wanted to show. This is from the US. If you, this was a study which was done by Iowa State University in Iowa. Iowa, as you know, is one of the most, the biggest agricultural states in the US. Almost everything, is grown there. But what they did was they went to several stores and tried to find out where each of their products is coming from, how far it is traveling before it reaches the store. So if you look at apples, they are coming from 1700 miles away. On an average, in any store in Iowa, the apples come from 1700 miles away. Broccoli comes from 1800 miles away. Even corn, right? Iowa is a corn state. Average corn in any Iowa store comes from 1400 miles away. And the third column is actually what is the nearest local source of the same product. So if you take any store in Iowa, corn is grown within 20 miles of that store. Similarly, apples are grown within 60 miles of that store. But they are actually getting the corn from 1400 miles away, right? So then what's happening to the corn which is grown 20 miles from this store? Maybe it's going another 1400 miles away to Washington DC or something, right? And this corn maybe it's coming from Mexico or something. So basically you can see the
It's like a food cartel or something, like they're trying to route through suppliers only.
Yeah, see, it might not be a cartel. See, it might not be something which is actually illegal in terms of whatever bad trade practices or something. Basically, it is how the food system has got itself organized. That it is more efficient for this store, more efficient in terms of dollars, right? To get it from some other place, which, like you said, basically it's all consolidation of the supply chain and everything, right? So there will be certain trader who will be procuring this corn from thousands of miles away, and then again transmitting it to stores which are thousands of miles away and so on, right? So this is the net effect of that whole process. So basically we have organized our economy, our food economy, in such a way that this makes more sense in terms of dollars. But whether it makes more sense in terms of the consumption of gasoline or anything else. How much preservation is required to take the food that long and preserve it and then take it to the store and so on. So in all those ways actually it is kind of absurd, right, that Iowa should be getting corn from 1400 miles away.
Actually, there's a report that one of the newspapers did, or Time or somebody like that, a few years back, that said that 95% of the cost of the food that if you pay $1 to buy something food, 95% of that cost goes to petroleum products. Most of it is transportation, some of it is fertilizers and so on.
Yeah.
But 95% of the cost is actually petroleum that goes into producing the food.
Yeah.
Or transporting it.
Even the fertilizer is probably petroleum.
Fertilizer is a petroleum product, and this
mostly
whole
transport.
food miles thing, right? That how many miles that food travels. So, and also there's also the issue of processed food. So much of the food that is eaten now is processed food, right? It's not raw food that you buy and then you cook at home and then eat fresh food, right? It is something that is already processed. Is it in the form of, bread is actually one of the maybe least processed food, but most food that people eat is actually even more processed. And in fact, there is a study. Michael Pollan in his book actually talks about it. If you follow traditional agriculture, right? Traditional agriculture before the advent of industrial agriculture, from 1 calorie of sunlight, sun energy, from 1 calorie of solar energy, you can produce 2.7 calories of food energy. Okay, so that is what agriculture does in terms of getting our food from solar energy. But once you bring in industrial agriculture, where you have large machines doing the agriculture, 1 calorie of solar energy actually produces less than 1 calorie of food energy. So already your efficiency is actually less than 1. But if you look at the processed food that we eat, then for producing 1 calorie of food energy, you actually use 10 calories of energy of all forms. I mean, the solar energy for growing the food, then all the machines that use for processing and all the transportation, everything if you take into it. 1 calorie to get 1 calorie of food energy, we're actually spending 10 calories of energy. So that's the level of inefficiency that's there.
So why is industrial agriculture's 1 calorie solar energy gets that less than 1? I mean,
No, that's
shouldn't
because
that
of
be
the
a
fertilizers and the and all the machinery that is involved in actually processing the
but
thing.
that ratio from sun to the food.
No, I actually, maybe I misspoke. I don't mean 1 calorie of solar energy,
Or to the food
but
energy.
1 calorie of total energy. Total energy that is used. Yeah. And then there is the whole use of pesticides, right? Which has again become very rampant. And in India, actually, the pesticide residues are so bad. I mean, this table, this is actually a study done by the Food Safety and Standards Authority. They just took various products and then tried to see the pesticide residues. So you see the MRL, which is like the maximum residue level that's supposed to be safe level. And if you take any of this cauliflower, for example, 117 times the maximum residue level. In fact, cauliflowers are actually directly dipped in pesticide. Like you have drums of pesticides, and cauliflower is actually dipped into it just before it's brought into market. It is not even that it's used during the growing of the food crop, and therefore somehow it gets washed away by rain and so on. Before coming to the market, they actually dip it in the pesticide. So I hope that pesticide is actually diluted.
Why is that?
Hmm?
Why are they dipping at that table?
No, because see, cauliflower is actually not a native plant to India, so it is prone to pests. And in fact, you might find like little white color worms that would come in cauliflower. Obviously consumers are like the worms, right? Obviously the vendors who want to sell it, want the consumers to buy it, so they dip it in pesticide and bring it. So you don't see those worms, right? But obviously, having a worm inside your cauliflower, which obviously will go away when you cut the cauliflower, right, is better than having it dipped in pesticide, right? But that is that's the way that it is all organized. Amul milk, right, is found to have the highest amount of pesticide residues,
So
236
How
times.
does pesticide enter into milk?
Huh?
How does pesticide enter into milk?
How does pesticide? No, through the
How is it?
food cycle. Basically, whatever feed the see, pesticides are chemicals which actually accumulate. I mean, the accumulation happens. So as the animals eat food which is it could be grass, it could be grain, whatever, right? It is full of pesticide. Those actually accumulate in the animal's body much more in the organ. So it then comes out through milk and so on. So meat would have a
cows
huh?
are more.
Huh?
Gujarati cows are more. They eat more pesticide.
Maybe. Gujarat is an advanced industrial state, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and Punjabi cows might have a little more. So, no, it is true. Actually, Punjab is the one where the pesticide problem is the most acute at this time. So, I'll just go into that. But before that, I want to I want to just point out again that a lot of these are also, I mean, some of the examples that we saw, they are all driven by consumer choice, right? Whether it's the shiny red apples, whether it is the dal, whether it is even the cauliflower, right? That we don't brinjal, for example, right? So brinjal has this fruit and shoot borer which gets into the fruit, and once the worm gets into the fruit, it's very difficult to kill it with any pesticide or anything, right? So when we were, several years ago, always it used to be a common thing that brinjals, when you buy a kg of brinjals, generally some of them at least will have some worm inside them. Typically you see that you try to identify a little hole that is there in the brinjal, and then you discard that, right? That is the normal selection process that happens when you go to a grocery store. But these days, if you go and look at the brinjals, you don't find the brinjals with the holes, right? Brinjals are very neat and clean, right? You're happy at the grocery store, mom is happy at home, and so on, right? But how is it happening that brinjal doesn't don't have the fruit borer? Is because of the heavy use of pesticides. So it is also driven by the choices that we are making.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So in the previous slide when you showed the numbers, like what was the source?
Which one?
The
This one.
tables? Yeah.
This is a study by the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India, which
So-
was constituted like 3 years ago. So
Okay.
it's their study, official study.
So is the average consumer, is he aware of these numbers? Like of these, I mean if they see this
Awareness is also has various levels, right? See, when this study came out, right, this came in down to earth. So obviously, average consumer doesn't read down to earth, right? But we actually made a press release of this and gave it to newspapers. So many of the newspapers carried little items. Then one of the local newspapers in Telugu, Sakshi, is one of the biggest newspapers. So that had some a reporter who's known to us who was very keen on this. So they actually ran a whole series. In fact, they went and did tests in Hyderabad, pesticide residue tests, and about 2 or 3 weeks later, they ran a front page article listing the pesticide residues. And then after that, it also got a response. And in fact, they ran a whole series on pesticides in our food, on safe food. In fact, we collaborated with them to do something called Intipanta series of articles on how to grow food in your own home, right? Urban gardening, basically. And then they in fact conducted programs, public programs, every week. So CSA is one organization which I work closely with. So CSA and some of us, we all work together to actually make presentations at these programs. So each program, some 500 people turned up. And these were of course advertised in Sakshi. So Sakshi would advertise, so this Saturday in Tarnaka there's an independent program, next Saturday it's in Kondapur and so on, right? So I went to 2 or 3 of these programs and we gave presentations. We had workshops outside on how to grow food and so on. So each program 500 people turned up. So I mean, which means that people are reading that and people are aware. But the thing is that for many of the people, it is just something which is part of life, right? I mean, this is just the way it is, so you can't do much about it, and then they just black out that information. So that is what typically.
still not banned or what? Endosulfan?
No, endosulfan is not banned. I mean, we signed on to an agreement which will ban endosulfan 5 years from now. Okay, and but beyond that 5 years also there is a grace period for the industry to phase out the endosulfan. So finally the endosulfan will be out of India 10 years from now. So that agreement was what was signed by MOEF last year. Okay.
So, is this prevalent in all parts of the country, and when did this start happening?
Which
The
one,
use of pesticides and
Heavy use of pesticides is part of the whole green revolution package. Yeah. So we'll just get into that little bit. I want to finish my horror story. So, so Punjab, right? Punjab actually has the highest incidence of cancer and various other problems. So cancer started getting attention. Actually, people who are working on these pesticide issues and on promoting sustainable agriculture and all that have been crying hoarse about the whole crisis in Punjab agriculture. But Punjab was always on a high, right? That they are the model state for green revolution and biggest producers, highest productivity, and so on. So all the agriculture university, the the agriculture department, everybody is basically bought into that. So there were very little. I mean, it was very tough to break through that thing. But as the health problems started showing up in a major way, ultimately they also had to take notice. And from 2008 onwards, actually the government also has instituted some studies and so on. And in 2009, they when you can just look at the results of the studies, right? 36% of the farmers' blood samples have DNA damage, and mostly these are farmers who are doing the spraying themselves, right? Or they are exposed in close quarters, to the pesticide. And then there's also a clear cut correlation between the areas where there's heavy use of pesticides and these diseases, cancer and the DNA damage and so on. Cotton, paddy and wheat growers have the highest incidence of this damage. That's in the Punjab University study. And the State Planning Board study basically showed that this 4 districts, right, Bathinda, Faridkot and Muktsar and Mansa, they are called a cancer belt. So they took 17 villages in that, and this is where actually the heaviest pesticide usage also happens. So it also happens to be cancer belt, right? So it's not really a coincidence. But if you ask the pesticide industry people, they basically deny any connection whatsoever between cancer or any of these problems and pesticide usage, right? And it is difficult to establish a causal connection also. But some of these studies show that there is heavy pesticides in the groundwater. There are 91 deaths due to cancer in 4 villages, right? See, almost 1 in every 5-6 families have a cancer patient. So that's the kind of incidence that is there. And but it's not just cancer. I mean, it's various diseases like fertility problems, big time on the rise. That's the biggest booming business is fertility clinics in Punjab, and birth defects and miscarriages. So all these things are become very prevalent, and then kidney problems. Because the more poisonous things you consume, right? Kidney is the one which has to flush it out. So kidney problems are very prevalent. So these are all things that you are seeing much more in Punjab. But when we did the Kisan Swaraj Yatra, right, we found that in many other places also people are saying this. It's not come from any official studies. Like we went to Krishna district, which is one of the intense agriculture zones in districts in Andhra Pradesh. So there, when we had a public meeting, we didn't talk anything about the Punjab studies or cancer or anything. We basically said that sustainable agriculture is good. We believe that we should reduce the use of chemicals and so on. So the farmers there started saying, yeah, we agree, because we find that there are a lot of health problems that are showing up, kidney problems and cancer cases and so on. So that was coming from the people. So people also are realizing that actually there is a connection, but the industry would deny it completely. So I just want to end with that question. So which is the only species which poisons its own food, right? So everywhere in nature, the ultimate thing is actually survival, right? So most of the species have developed highly sophisticated mechanisms for trying to figure out, what is good food, what is not good food, smell, sight, the different colors of foods, and even very, animals which are much down the chain have very sophisticated ways of recognizing what is good food, what is not good food. So we are the only species which put poison in our own food, and we have built actually a complex system where where there are incentives to put poison in our own food, right? So that's the kind of thing. So it's basically so this whole issue of food, the way the food system is organized. So this is actually a civilizational question. It's not. It is something which where I think the entire human civilization is kind of at a crossroads. So if we go down the same path of industrial food production with heavy use of chemicals and so on, it might soon become a survival issue for us. So how we get out of this path is actually a very, I think, very important question, for all of us. So it's important that we also, figure out how to actually tackle these problems and work on it. Yeah. So I just want to, I mean, we've gone through, how our own food, is actually, I mean, what our own food is going through, from the production to reaching our plate. And then the other question would be what is happening to the farmers who grow our food, and what do our own choices, how do our own choices impact this larger picture. So I just wanted to quote Sir Albert Howard, who is one of the pioneers of organic farming. The whole problem of health in soil, plant, animal, and humans is one great subject. So when you were asking about why pesticides, right? And when did pesticide usage begin to increase? So pesticide usage began to increase at the same time as the fertilizer usage began to increase. Okay, and this whole package of producing, and it's the same time as these high yielding varieties were brought in, right? So when you try to engineer your crops so that they give maximum production, obviously they become weaker in some other traits. So you are basically breeding them for one particular trait, right? So they become weaker in other traits. So many of these high yielding varieties are actually less resistant to pests, less resistant to adverse climatic conditions and so on. And then you are also putting in a lot of chemical fertilizers, which are like boosts of it's like what do you say? It's like steroids, right? So when somebody is taking steroids, their immunity is is always lowered. So somebody who's on steroids to treat some particular disease or disorder is actually likely to get infections much more. So it's something similar to that. Basically, when we give fertilizers and keep giving chemical fertilizers in big doses, so this actually every farmer knows. Every farmer knows that you give urea, and immediately the field becomes very green. So really it becomes dark green. So they know that nitrogen gives a boost, and plants become green. And they also know that 1 week from giving urea, you get a pest attack. So they actually spray pests 1 week after applying urea. So it actually makes the plants more vulnerable to pest attack. So if you are actually looking at the health of the soil, if you are looking after the health of the soil, so that the soil itself is providing enough nutrients in a whole form to the plant, then the plant actually grows stronger and it is less prone to pests. So this whole thing is actually a connected cycle. So basically, when we look at our agriculture, so what is not good for our own health in terms of our food and the way that the food system is organized, right? That we were talking about, is actually not good for the farmers also. So it's not that it is benefiting farmers and therefore this is the kind of system that is there, right? we have to figure out who it is benefiting actually, why the system is like this. Because it's not benefiting the consumers, it's not benefiting the farmers. So if you look at the agricultural crisis in India, you must have heard about the farmers' suicides, big crisis and distress situation that the farmers are going through throughout the country, and numbers are just mind-boggling that 250,000 farmers in 16 years have committed suicide, and it's continuing. Despite lot of attention being thrown on it from until 2003 or so. Actually, only a few people used to write about it, and it used to be talked about only in a few circles. But since then, it actually became a big public debating matter. In fact, the 2004 elections, both at the state, some of the states, and at the national level, were actually one of the turning points was the agricultural crisis. So as soon as the new government came in 2005, they established a farmers commission. They gave a package for Vidarbha, and there was a debt relief by the Prime Minister, Prime Minister's debt relief package, which cost some 76,000 crores. So it is not that the scale of the crisis is not known. It is known, but despite that, actually, it is continuing at the same state because the real problems, underlying problems have not been addressed. So even in 2010, actually, there were almost 16,000 suicides in India. 2011, the figures haven't yet come. But where we are working in AP, actually last year was very bad in terms of farmers' distress and so on, both because of weather problems as well as other systemic issues that are there. So 2011 actually might be worse. We did many fact-finding visits, like in September-October time frame. We saw a spate of suicides happening, so we went to many of these districts, spoke to the families of farmers who committed suicides, and kind of documented it. And when we made that report public, in AP it became big news. Then we also went and presented it to a bunch of MPs in Delhi, and then it became an issue in the Parliament session also. In Rajya Sabha, there was almost a half a day debate on the farmer suicides issue, and Sharad Pawar had to make a statement saying that we'll constitute a committee which will actually go and look into this farmer suicides issue. But they are still in denial mode. Like in AP, we documented just in a 1 month period 96 farmer suicides in just 6 districts. Out of the 23 districts in AP, just 6 districts there were 96 suicides. But during the same time, the government figures for the entire year were only 72. For the entire year, for all the districts, it was only 70. So there's a big denial of the problem. Also, that basically they want to show that since the Prime Minister's package, and since the government has started taking quote-unquote pro-farmer measures, the number of suicides have declined. So that is what the AP government wants to show. And in many states, that is what the attempt is, that they want to cover up the crisis that's happening. But actually, it is continuing at the same level or even more intense. So basically, underlying this whole thing is that the income that the farmers make is very inadequate. In fact, in many cases, the income is not even sufficient for them to meet their own, just the basic living expenditures also, let alone any savings. And in many cases, the farmers actually make a negative income. They make a loss year after year. This is a Arjun Sengupta Commission report which came out in 2007. So for the first time, actually, after a long period, I think maybe the first time after independence, there was a commission set up to look at the economics of unorganized sector. So the entire unorganized sector workers, what is happening to their economics? So that's what this commission was looking at. So farmers are the most, the biggest part of the unorganized sector. So they found that average income per family per month is only 2,000 rupees for the entire family. 2,115, and for small farmers, which is basically less than 5 acres. So this 2,115 includes, is an average across all farmers, including the big farmers, landlords, and everybody. But for small farmers less than 5 acres, it's only 1,659. But if you look at the average expenditure, family expenditure, it's about 2,770. So every month, they are actually in a deficit, right? So no wonder they are going to debt, and it's causing distress. And if a particular year there is a crop failure, then automatically it will be a big dip. They'll go into debt by 75,000 rupees, 1 lakh rupees, 50,000 rupees, and so on. Even the small farmers. And typically we saw that in all the suicide, families with farmers committed suicide, once the debt crosses 1 lakh rupees, right, then it's a clear sign of distress. So that's what we are seeing. But underlying this is partly it is about the whole economic system being anti-farmer, right? So we can go into more details if we are interested into that. The other part of it is that the model of agriculture itself is unsustainable. Using so much of pesticides and chemicals and fertilizers and so on actually places a huge financial burden on the farmers. So upfront you have to put a lot of investment. And the cost of agriculture and cost of all these inputs is going up, whereas the prices of the farm produce are not going up. I mean, they're kind of stagnant. They might be going up slightly, but don't keep pace with what's happening with the inputs. So that's the underlying problem. So if you look at this cues, right? This is a annual scene. Before the season starts or just at the beginning of the season. This is in Andhra Pradesh. This is a village in Khammam, where this whole queue is for fertilizers, for buying fertilizers. So in fact, when to sell fertilizers these days, fertilizers are sold by the sold in police stations. Basically, because if they are sold at this is at the peak time when all the farmers want to buy at the beginning of the season, right? So they actually sell the fertilizers in the police stations so that the security problem doesn't arise. Because if it's just the fertilizer dealer and these long queues are there, obviously there will be a maramari and all that. So this is an annual feature in many states, and now the prices of the fertilizers are going up very significantly. So a bag of DAP used to be just 480 rupees. This is a subsidized price. Now on DAP, the government used to give a subsidy of 75%. So when the farmer buys it for 500 rupees, actually the real cost of the DAP bag is 2000 rupees. Okay. Then last year the government started started lifting the subsidy, basically reducing the subsidy. In fact, in 2008, the total subsidy was 1,19,000 crores on just fertilizers. 1,19,000 crores. That's about like maybe 12-13% of the entire union budget was just fertilizer subsidy. So the government got a real heart attack and said that okay, we are reducing the subsidy. They didn't, take up a major program to actually reduce the use of fertilizer, right? And shift to more sustainable methods, but they basically decided to at least reduce the burden on the state. So now the fertilizers have become much more expensive. In 2012 January, already a bag of DAP was 1,050, and then by February it was 1,150. And by the time this season starts, we are very sure that it's going to go to 1,800 and so on this season. So that's the kind of inflation that is there in the prices of the fertilizers, and this time they've also decontrolled the urea prices. So last year they didn't decontrol urea, this time they decontrolled urea.
So in a way it deters the farmers from
Yeah.
buying. So wouldn't it be good actually for the environment that now fertilizer is expensive, you deter consumption?
No, it is good, in terms of reducing the fertilizer usage, but it is bad in terms of the squeeze that it puts on the farmer. So it has to happen in a way that
Farmers have an alternative.
farmers have an alternative, and farmers have a support system, for actually shifting to a better, more sustainable thing. So I mean, it is happening to a certain extent. I mean, it's not that the whole scenario is bleak. So I'll talk about the successes and some of the positive things that are happening. But the crisis is very large, and the crisis, you can see all the different dimensions of the crisis. See, for seeds also it's the same problem. In fact, just 2 days ago there was a news that in Maharashtra there was a police firing on farmers who had queued up for seed, and the seed was not available, so they started getting angry. They started throwing stones, and the police fired at the farmers, and a couple of people got killed. So these kind of things are also every year they happen, every year. This time it was about the BT cotton seed by Mahiko. It could be cotton seed, it could be groundnut seed. In Anantapur district, groundnut seed, there is a huge queues every time. So you can see, I mean, these are all pictures of queues of people waiting for fertilizers and waiting for seed. So essentially, you can see that the whole system where the farmers have become heavily dependent on outside inputs, and those outside inputs will naturally get squeezed. That has made the life very difficult for farmers. So basically, what is the way out? Right? Basically, I think that agriculture in India is at a crossroads, and really, what happens in the next 5 to 10 years is very, very crucial. So it will determine whether majority of the people are going to leave agriculture and go out of the rural areas, which will mean an enormous amount of distress, because our urban areas are already exploding. They can't really absorb any more people and give them any gainful employment. And in fact, if you look at the employment figures, it's quite bad actually. The rate of the number of jobs that are being created in the organized sector are actually very low. In fact, 10 years ago, there were 9% of all the employable people in India had jobs in the organized sector. Now it's only 8%. So as a percentage, actually the number of jobs in the organized sector have reduced. In this whole era of globalization, liberalization, and so on, right? The roaring economy of India is actually not keeping pace with the providing employment to the people. And if you are going to impoverish farmers in the rural area and kind of force them to push out into the urban areas, the problem is only going to become worse, right? So it is at a crossroads, and whatever happens in the next 10 years, I think is the most crucial for India's agriculture and by implication for the entire rural economy and then the urban economy.
So, what is the impact of those fertilizers and pesticides on the topsoil? People say that only 6 inches of the topsoil can be used. So what is the impact of that?
That's a very important thing. Basically, the reason the fertilizer usage and pesticide usage basically is unsustainable is because it is spoiling the entire ecology of the field. Part of it is about the soil fertility, right? So it's actually leading to salination of the soil. One bag of urea, for example, one bag of urea, it doesn't have only urea. It has actually also urea, as a base. In fact, it uses chalk powder. So lot of calcium is getting into the soil through your urea application, and lot of the application of fertilizers actually, not all of it is actually used up by the plant. So much of it actually remains in the soil in other forms. So the entire chemical, so you see a lot of, in Telugu they call it chaudu powder. The soil actually becomes hardened, and it's no longer porous and so on, and you can even see white crystallization happening in the soil. This is all because of the increased calcium in the soil. So it actually spoils the soil, and the pesticide of course is poison directly. So it whatever residue actually flows into the soil, into the environment, kills much of the living organisms that are there. So basically, the whole thing about organic farming, if you look at the alternative agriculture models and so on, right? The first mindset change that needs to happen is that soil is the living system, right? Soil is not just chemistry, right? Not that you try to see, okay, what are the proportion of N, P, K, and zinc and boron and so on, and say that, okay, let me apply this much nitrogen, this much phosphorus, and so on. So it's not just chemistry, it's actually a living system. So if it's a living system, then it has its own way of regenerating, it has its own way of organic matter getting to the soil, that getting decomposed, nutrients getting released, and being made available to the plant and so on. So if you are able to conserve the soil as a living system, then your plants and agriculture and all can thrive. If not, you will become increasingly dependent on the fertilizer. So that is what has happened. So in Karnool, in the villages where we were working, right, very sensible farmer, like there's a farmer called Nageshwar Reddy, he's a senior farmer. He's always been known as a very, what do you say, progressive farmer, like that's the term that is used in India. Progressive farmer means a farmer who is always open to taking up new methods, understanding technology and so on. Okay, so he was one of the people who took to the green revolution methods of fertilizer and so on early. But at least he has he always used to follow the recommendations very closely and never overuse the fertilizers and so on. But even he says that even after being so careful, he is concluded that he has overused fertilizers and pesticides, and he is reducing. So when it started in 1970s, they were recommending half a bag of fertilizer per acre. Okay, they just used to put 25 kgs. Some people used to just put only 10 kgs. So one bag is 50 kgs. But now in that area, in Karnool district where we are working, right, they put minimum 10 bags per acre. From half a bag, it's become minimum 10 bags. There are places where they put 30 bags, like in East Godavari district, in the heavy intense belts, right, in Krishna district and Guntur district, where we traveled and talked to farmers. In chili farmers in Guntur district put 32 bags of fertilizer per acre, and half of it is DAP. Okay, and DAP is actually the more expensive of the fertilizers. So you can just imagine the way that their whole economics goes haywire, right? But it's also because of the soil getting depleted. So basically what you're doing is you are basically growing plants on saline, right? So instead of giving them food, you're growing them on saline, you're trying to inject nutrients directly. So, but instead what you should be doing is you make the soil stronger and richer and let the plants absorb the nutrients from the soil. So that is the natural process. So you deplete the soil, you make the soil completely sterile, so there won't be any earthworms,